My hands remember it before my mind does. The cold sweat of the champagne flute against my palm, the slow heat climbing up the back of my neck, the soft scrape of a chair leg across marble. That was the sound that ended my marriage. Not a scream, not a confession, not a door slamming in the middle of the night, just one chair being pulled out. Not for me. For her. 40 people sat around that private dining room pretending not to watch me realize what all of them already knew. Men in black suits. Women with diamonds at their throats. Elders of the Kang family who could freeze an entire business deal with one silent glance. Servers holding silver trays so still their wrists trembled. And at the head of the anniversary table, beneath a gold placard that said MRS, Kang, sat a woman in a red dress, one hand resting on her pregnant stomach, smiling like the seat had always belonged to her. My seat, my name, my anniversary dinner. My husband stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder. Jihoon Kang, my husband of 3 years. The man whose family name made powerful people lower their voices. The man who taught me that silence could be protection, punishment, or permission depending on who controlled the room. He looked at me when I entered. He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He looked annoyed, like I had interrupted something that had already been decided. What he didn't know was that the room had been decided long before he walked into it. He didn't know that the crystal chandelier above his mistress's head, the gold-rimmed plates in front of his family, the private entrance his men used, the kitchen preparing his anniversary dinner, and the marble floor beneath his polished shoes had all answered to me for the last 18 months. Quietly. Legally. Completely. He thought he was humiliating his wife in front of his family. He was about to learn he had seated his mistress inside my restaurant. And by the time the main course arrived, every person in that room would know exactly who Mrs. Kang had been all along. My name is Kendra Voss. For 3 years, the world called me Mrs. Kang, wife of Jihoon Kang, heir to one of the most feared Korean Mafia families operating behind shipping companies, private equity firms, and restaurants where no one asked why certain tables were never available to the public. To them, I was lucky. Chosen. The waitress who married too high and should have spent the rest of her life grateful for a seat beside power. But what none of them knew, not his mother, not his elders, not his private lawyers, not even my own husband, was that I had built a name under theirs. And tonight, when he sat his pregnant mistress in my chair at our anniversary dinner, he did it inside a room I owned. He humiliated me in my own house. He just didn't know yet that it was my house. 3 years earlier, I had a business degree gathering dust, $11,000 in savings, and a city that had already told me twice that ambition looked different when it came from a woman like me. Jihoon Kang walked into the restaurant where I waited tables on a slow Tuesday night with no entourage, no raised voice, and no need to prove he was dangerous. That was the first thing I should have noticed. Dangerous men don't always make noise. Sometimes they simply enter a room and everyone else remembers to be careful. He married me because I was the only person in his life who never asked him for anything. That should have been my first warning. Because a man who loves you for what you don't ask for will eventually punish you for needing anything at all. Tonight was our 3rd anniversary. Tonight, I found out he had not only betrayed me, he had invited everyone he respected to watch me be replaced. I walked into Onyx and Gold wearing a cream gown the same color as my wedding dress because some part of me still wanted to honor what that night was supposed to mean. The hostess froze when she saw me. Not because I was late, because she already knew. I saw the gold reserved placard first, Mrs. Kang. Then I saw Hana Bay sitting behind it. 26, maybe younger. Red satin stretched over her pregnant stomach. One hand resting where everyone could see it. One corner of her mouth lifted like she had been told the hard part was already over. Jihoon's hand rested on the back of her chair. My chair. He looked up and said, "Kendra, there's been a seating change. I'm sorry. Not let me explain. A seating change. Like I was a guest. Like I was staff. Like I was the one who had wandered into the wrong room. I could have embarrassed him the ordinary way. I could have screamed. Thrown the champagne. Demanded answers. Given every phone at that table a scene they could replay by morning. Instead, I smiled. Because anger would have made me look wounded. And I was done performing injury for people who mistook my silence for weakness. I walked to the host stand and asked, calmly, "Please bring me the general manager." He appeared in under 10 seconds. Not because I was Jihoon Kang's wife, because I was his employer. My husband didn't know that yet. He was about to. This is the night I stopped being Mrs. Kang and became the woman who owned the room he tried to shrink me in. If you have ever smiled through a room that thought it had already won Atlanta, Houston, Lagos, London, Toronto, Nairobi, wherever you are, stay with me. This one is for you. Before I married Jihoon Kang, I knew how to read a room before I knew how to read a menu. That is what poverty teaches you when it has manners. My mother cleaned office buildings at night. I did homework under fluorescent break room lights until I was old enough to work beside her, wiping down conference tables where men left half-finished coffees beside documents marked confidential. By 22, I had a business degree, a stack of polite rejection emails, and a waitressing job at a downtown steakhouse where men in expensive suits came to talk about deals they assumed women like me couldn't understand. I understood more than they thought. I understood margins from the way managers cut staff before cutting waste. I understood power from the way some customers snapped their fingers and others didn't need to. I understood insult from the way people said sweetheart when they meant stay in your place. Jihoon Kang came in on a Tuesday. Corner table. No entourage. Black coat. No visible jewelry except a watch too expensive to announce itself. He ordered steak, medium rare, and a glass of something dry and old that he never finished. The room changed around him. The host stopped laughing. The bartender straightened his posture. 2 men at table 7 lowered their voices mid-sentence, not because Jihoon looked at them, but because they knew better than to be loud in the presence of a Kang. I did not know his name meant anything yet. To me, he was just the quiet man who looked people directly in the eye and never made a server feel invisible. For 6 weeks, he sat at the same table. He asked about my degree. He asked what I would build if nobody kept closing doors. He tipped the bussers before he tipped me. He remembered that I drank ginger tea after my shift because coffee made my hands shake. One night, after closing, I spilled ice water down his sleeve because my hands were trembling when he asked me to have coffee with him. He laughed. Not politely, not charmingly, honestly. "You're the first person in years," he said, wiping his cuff, "who has been nervous around me for a reason that has nothing to do with fear." I thought that was romantic. Now I know it was a confession. Fear was the currency his family spent better than money. Our first coffee was in a 24-hour diner with cracked vinyl seats and terrible lighting. He chose it because, he said, nobody from his world would be caught there on purpose. That should have warned me too. A man who needs to hide ordinary happiness is already living under rules he may never be brave enough to break. But I was 24, tired of being overlooked, and he listened like my dreams were not childish. He asked what I wanted. I told him I wanted to own something. Not just work, I said. Not just survive. I want to build a place so well that nobody can tell me I don't belong inside it. He watched me for a long moment and said, "Then the market is wrong about you." That sentence opened something in me. For a while, I believed he saw me. Not the waitress. Not the accident. Not the woman his mother would later call unsuitable without using the word. Me. He proposed 8 months later on a Tuesday, after close, at the same restaurant where we met. No audience. No violinist. No ring in dessert. Just a velvet box on the bar between us. "I have spent my life being introduced to people because of what my family can do for them," he said. "You are the first person who ever looked at me like I was the interesting part." I said yes before I opened the box. I wish I could say I hesitated. I didn't. I mistook being chosen for being seen. There is a difference. Our wedding was small. Too small for a man with Jihoon's last name. 60 guests. Private garden. No press. No family announcements beyond what was required. Men in dark suits at the edges, watching exits more than vows. His mother, Insuk Kang, wore black. Not navy, not charcoal, black. I remember looking at her from the altar and thinking no woman wears mourning colours to a wedding by accident. Jihoon held my hand through the ceremony so tightly my fingers ached. At the time, I thought he was afraid of losing me. Later, I understood a man can hold you tightly and still never make room for you. At the reception, I overheard In-suk speaking Korean to an aunt beside the garden wall. She married beneath the family, she said. She did not know I had learned enough Korean from Jihoon's late-night calls to understand. Or maybe she did. Maybe cruelty feels cleaner when it pretends to be accidental. I never told Jihoon I heard her. I filed it away. That became the structure of my marriage. Hear, smile, file it away. Marrying into the Kang family meant entering a house of rules no one wrote down because everyone was too afraid not to know them already. Do not ask why certain cars idled outside at 2 a.m. Do not ask why Jihoon's office had 2 locks, but no family photographs. Do not ask why men twice his age called him sir with their eyes lowered. Do not ask why shipping ledgers were discussed in private dining rooms instead of boardrooms. Do not ask why a woman could be married to power and still never be allowed to touch it. I learned those rules the way you learn the weak places in a staircase by stepping wrong and remembering the sound. At first, Jihoon tried. I want to be fair about that. He brought me tea when I had headaches. He sent flowers after difficult dinners with his mother. He stood behind me once when an uncle asked if I planned to stay busy now that I had married well. Kendra has a degree in business, he said sharply. The uncle laughed like that. It was charming. Jihoon did not laugh. Those moments kept me hopeful longer than they should have, because when someone defends you occasionally, it becomes easy to ignore how often they leave you undefended. 6 months into the marriage, his family placed a small trust in my name. Not enough to make me powerful, enough to make me comfortable. That was the point. Comfort can be a prettier cage than poverty if you are not careful. In-suk expected designer gowns, charity luncheons, quiet hobbies, maybe a foundation with my married name on a gold plaque, something harmless and photographed. Instead, I bought a failing restaurant 3 blocks from the harbour. Onyx and gold. Good bones, bad debt, terrible management. A kitchen full of tired people who had stopped believing the place could become anything better. The owner was desperate to sell quietly. I bought it through Meridian Hearth Group, a company filed under my maiden name, Voss. Layered cleanly enough that anyone searching for Kang would find nothing. Jihoon knew I had a little investment project. That is what he called it. Little. He never asked for the paperwork. That was his mistake. In his world, women's money was supposed to be soft, safe, decorative, and easy to ignore. I let him ignore it. Every dollar he dismissed became a brick. I hired Priya Adiemi as head chef after 3 restaurants told her she was talented but not quite the face they wanted leading a kitchen. I told her I did not need her to be the face. I needed her to be the fire. She looked at me across a stainless steel prep table and said, "Do you actually own this place?" I smiled. Enough to make decisions. She laughed. But she watched me more carefully after that. I rebuilt the wine program at night with a consultant who charged by the hour and underestimated me for the first 3 sessions. By the 4th, he stopped explaining basic margins and started bringing me rare lists. I learned licensing, payroll, supplier contracts, private booking rules, security protocols. Not the fake kind of security wealthy people use for decoration. Real protocols. The kind required when your restaurant becomes a favorite meeting place for families who own legitimate companies in public and settle private matters over dessert. That was the first twist I did not expect. The Kang family began using onyx and gold without realizing I owned it. At first, it was one cousin booking the upstairs dining room, then an uncle, then In-suk herself, who liked the discretion, the private entrance, the staff who knew how not to stare. She praised the restaurant once at our dinner table. "The ownership finally has taste," she said. I nearly choked on my water. Jihoon nodded without looking up from his phone. "Good. We need a dependable venue." Dependable. That word stayed with me, because by then, I had become dependable to everyone. Wife. Hostess. Silent listener. Safe assumption. No one is more invisible than a woman everyone thinks they have already defined. The first month, Onyx and Gold turned a real profit. I sat alone at table 12 after closing with a glass of the cheapest wine on our own list. I cried, not because I was sad, because for the first time in my life, something was mine without apology. Not borrowed from a husband's name. Not handed through pity. Not allowed under supervision. Mine. Then I went home and found Jihoon asleep on the couch, his phone face down, smelling faintly of a floral perfume I did not own. I stood there for a long time. Then I took off my coat, folded it over a chair, and told myself noticing is not knowing. Women lie to themselves like that when truth would require movement before they are ready. The first time I truly understood the danger wrapped around Jihoon's name, a man came to our gate after midnight, Deacon Ferris. I remember the name because Jihoon said it only once, and even the household staff went still. The man was angry about a missing shipment, a delayed payment, a private ledger that had apparently been balanced in someone else's favor. Jihoon stepped onto the porch in an undershirt and spoke in a voice I had never heard before. Not loud. Worse. Empty. 4 sentences. That was all it took. Deacon got back into his car and left so quickly his tires clipped the curb. Jihoon came inside, poured a drink, and said, "Go back to sleep." It's handled. I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling beside him until dawn, understanding that my husband carried an entire second life inside him. A life with debts, loyalty, fear, and consequences. A life everyone knew not to question. So I stopped asking questions at home and asked better ones at work. Who booked which rooms? Which names repeated? Which shell companies paid in advance? Which Kang relatives preferred no digital paper trail? No one trained me to survive his world. They simply underestimated me inside it. That was better. In-suk had a habit of arriving at our house unannounced on weekday afternoons. She called it checking on the household. It was an inspection. White glove on the sideboard. Eyes on the flowers. Questions about whether I had learned Jihoon's favorite dishes. Comments about women who understand family duty. One afternoon, she found a stack of renovation invoices from Onyx and Gold on the kitchen counter. She picked one up. Her eyes moved across the page. For 1 second, I thought she saw me. Then she set it down. "Jihoon says you have a hobby," she said. "Something like that," I answered. "It is good for a woman to have somewhere to put her energy," she said, "as long as she remembers what actually matters." I smiled. That smile was not submission. It was storage. I stored every insult, every missed dinner, every time Jihoon texted an apology instead of coming home, every time his phone lit up and he turned it face down, every time his mother called me Jihoon's wife like Kendra was a temporary inconvenience, and while they thought I was shrinking, I was signing contracts. The name Hannah Bay entered my life at a family dinner I almost skipped. In-suk hosted those dinners like court proceedings. The food was expensive, the conversations controlled, and every guest knew where to sit without asking. Seating was hierarchy in that family. Every chair meant something. That is why what happened on my anniversary mattered. In the Kang world, seats are not just seats. They are declarations. That night, I was near the kitchen doorway refilling my own water because the staff had been trained to hover around everyone except me. Invisible habits are hard to break. In-suk stepped into the next room to take a call. Her voice was low. Not low enough. "Hana is due in the spring," she said in Korean. "It would be better for everyone if this happened quietly. Jihoon still has obligations before anything changes." The pitcher stopped midair in my hand. Water spilled onto the floor. No one noticed. That is the mercy of being invisible. You can fall apart quietly and still gather evidence. I did not confront In-suk. I did not confront Jihoon. A younger version of me would have demanded answers that night. The version I had become knew better. Questions warn guilty people. Information corners them. I hired Bernadette Cho through Meridian Hearth's corporate account. She was a private investigator with a calm voice, careful eyes, and a way of speaking that made truth feel less dramatic and more surgical. 2 weeks later, she met me at a diner across town and slid a manila folder over the table. Inside were photographs. Jihoon and Hana at a rooftop restaurant in Seoul, his hand at the small of her back. A private apartment lease paid through an account linked 3 transfers deep to the Kang shipping division. A sonogram dated 4 months earlier. A hotel receipt. A jewelry invoice. A dinner reservation under an alias I recognized because that same alias had booked Onyx and Gold's upstairs room twice in the previous year. That one almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because disrespect becomes absurd when it is documented properly. Bernadette watched my face carefully. "You don't have to act yet," she said. Some people wait years. Some act immediately. There is no correct timeline for betrayal. I thanked her, paid in cash, then sat in my car for 47 minutes before I could turn the key. I gave myself one red light to cry on the way home. One. Then I wiped my face. Because grief is real, but so is rent. So is payroll. So is power. So is the fact that men like Jihoon survive by assuming women will be too emotional to be precise. I became precise. For 3 months, I let the marriage continue like a stage play where everyone except the audience knew the ending. Jihoon came home late. I asked fewer questions. In-suk watched me with increasing satisfaction, perhaps believing I had finally accepted my place. Hana existed in the margins, a name on documents, a shadow in receipts, a body growing more visible in a life I had not yet been publicly removed from. Meanwhile, I finished the final ownership transfers for Onyx and Gold. Meridian Hearth Group acquired the last minority interest from the previous owner's silent partner. Liquor license renewal completed. Lease extension secured. Private event contract language updated. Staffing authority clarified. I made one new rule in the employee handbook. In any conflict between a VIP guest and ownership prevails. David Okoro, my general manager, read the clause and looked up at me. Are we expecting a conflict? I signed the page. We are expecting clarity. He did not ask another question. Good managers know when the answer is already standing in the room. 2 weeks before our anniversary, Jihoon came to Onyx and Gold for a private meeting with 3 elders from his family. He did not know I was in the back office reviewing payroll. Through the security monitor, I watched him enter with that same controlled authority that used to make my heart lift before it learned better. He walked past the host stand without looking at the hostess. Walked past Priya's open kitchen without noticing the chef whose food had turned that place into a destination. Walked past my office door without knowing my name was on the documents inside. At one point, he paused beneath the chandelier and said to David, "My family depends on this place. Make sure nothing changes." David's eyes flicked toward the camera. Toward me. Then back to Jihoon. "Of course, Mr. Kang," he said. "Nothing changed. That was the beauty of it. Nothing visible changed at all. Only the truth underneath everything was getting ready to surface. I chose our anniversary dinner because I knew Jihoon. If I asked him privately, he would lie privately. If I showed him evidence, he would manage me. If I cried, he would pity me just long enough to escape consequences. But if I let him reveal himself in the one room where his family measured power by seating arrangements, he would not be able to pretend the humiliation was accidental. Some men only tell the truth when the walls are already closing in. I wanted to be standing in the room where the walls belonged to me. I chose the cream gown deliberately, the same color as my wedding dress. Not because I was sentimental, because symbolism matters in rooms where people pretend not to speak plainly. The driver asked if I wanted him to wait. I said yes. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, perhaps hearing something in my voice. "Long night?" he asked. "Not for me," I said. Onyx and Gold glowed from the curb like a promise. Gold light. Black marble. White roses climbing the entry columns, the kind of place women photograph before entering and men pretend not to be impressed by. Private event tonight. Kang anniversary dinner. That was what the booking said. The irony was almost generous. I arrived 15 minutes late on purpose, late enough for the room to settle. Late enough for everyone to choose who they were before I entered. The hostess saw me first. Her smile collapsed so quickly I almost felt sorry for her. "Mrs. V," she began, then caught herself. "Mrs. Kang." I touched her hand gently. "It's all right." Because it was. Not for them. For me. The private dining room doors opened. 40 faces turned. The first thing I saw was the table. Long, gold-trimmed, white roses, crystal glasses, anniversary candles arranged by someone with excellent taste and no conscience. The second thing I saw was the placard, Mrs. Kang, at the head of the table. The third thing I saw was Hana Bay sitting behind it. Red dress, pregnant stomach, diamonds at her ears that looked too new to be heirlooms. Her hand rested on the curve of her belly in that careful way pregnant women do when everyone in the room already knows and no one knows what to say. Jihoon stood behind her, his hand on the chair. My chair. His mother sat 2 places away, watching me like a woman waiting for a servant to drop a tray. Jihoon was the first to speak. "Kendra," he said, "there has been a small seating change. That sentence will stay with me longer than I want it to. Not because it hurt the most, because it clarified the most. A man who can reduce your public replacement to a seating change has already practiced erasing you in private." I looked at the empty chair near the far end of the table beside 2 cousins I barely knew. That was where he expected me to sit. Not beside him, not across from him, not even close enough to be angry with dignity. At the end, where forgotten wives go when powerful families have already moved on but still want the room to look civilized. Insuk folded her hands. "Kendra," she said, finally using my name, "this does not need to become uncomfortable." I looked at Hana. For 1 second, her confidence flickered. That mattered, because it told me someone had promised her this would be easy. Someone had told her I would fold. Someone had described me as soft enough to step over. I did not hate her in that moment. I was too clear for hatred. This was not about the woman in the chair. This was about the man who pulled it out for her. I smiled. "Of course," I said. "Let me just say hello to the kitchen first. It's tradition." Jihoon's brow tightened. He hated sentences he could not immediately control. "Kendra," he said quietly. I did not stop walking. That was the first act of divorce. Not the paperwork, not the lawyers. That walk across the dining room while every Kang elder watched me choose not to obey. The room went quiet behind me. Not silent. Quiet. There is a difference. Silence is empty. Quiet is full of people deciding whether the rules have changed. David Okoro was already near the host stand. Tall. Composed. Black suit. Gold nameplate. The kind of manager wealthy guests mistook for decorative until they needed something impossible done by dessert. He saw my face and straightened. "Mrs. Voss?" That name landed softly. Privately. "Mine." "Bring me the ownership binder," I said. "The black one from the back office safe. And ask Priya to pause the main course for 6 minutes." His eyes moved once toward the private dining room, then back to me. Understood. He did not ask if I was sure. I had built a team that knew the difference between drama and instruction. In the back hallway, Priya came out of the kitchen wiping her hands on a towel. She took one look at me. What did he do? That nearly broke me. Not the mistress, not the chair, that question. Because some people see you without needing the whole story. "Paused main course," I said. Priya's jaw tightened. "Done." "Also," I added, "no one in that room receives special service for the next 10 minutes. A small smile crossed her face. "The food will survive. So will they." I walked back into the dining room at the exact moment Jihoon began pretending nothing unusual had happened. He was mid-sentence with an elder named Chairman Bake, a man who had spent 3 years looking through me as though I were tinted glass. Hana sat very still now. Insuk watched my empty hands first, then saw David appear behind me with the black leather binder. Her expression changed. Not fear yet. Recognition. Power recognizes paperwork before people do. I stopped at the head of the table, beside the chair where Hana still sat. My chair. I did not ask her to move. Not yet. "Before we continue," I said, my voice calm enough to make the entire table lean in, "I would like to make a toast." Jihoon's face relaxed slightly. That almost made me sad. Even then, he believed I would protect him. That is what happens when a woman spends years keeping a man's peace. He begins to think her silence belongs to him. I lifted my glass. 3 years ago, I married into this family as a waitress. A few eyes shifted. Insuk's mouth tightened. The word waitress was never said as a compliment in this room. It was whispered in Korean, implied in seating arrangements, folded into every introduction where my name came after my husband's title. Jihoon stood. "Kendra." I looked at him. He sat back down. Not because I raised my voice, because David opened the binder. Gold embossing caught the chandelier light. Chairman Bike leaned forward. So did 2 of Jihoon's uncles. Men who ignored women will still lean toward documents. "This restaurant," I said, turning the first page, "was purchased 18 months ago by Meridian Hearth Group. The controlling member is Kendra Voss. I let the name settle. Not Kang. Voss. My maiden name. The one many of you never bothered to learn." A server somewhere near the wall inhaled sharply. No one corrected them. Good. Let the room breathe for me. Jihoon stared at the binder. That's not possible. I smiled gently. That was the only mercy I gave him. It is possible. It is filed. It is licensed. It is insured. It is profitable. And it has been hosting your family's private meetings, birthday dinners, elder councils, and anniversary celebrations for over a year, while all of you assumed the woman checking floral arrangements was simply trying to stay busy. Chairman Baik looked at Jihoon. That was when my husband began to understand the real damage. Not the marriage, his standing. In that world, adultery could be managed. Embarrassment could be buried. But being outmaneuvered by the wife your family dismissed? That was not a scandal. That was a weakness. Insuk spoke first. You used Kang money. There it was. The accusation she needed to survive the room. I nodded once to David. He turned 3 pages. No, I said. The initial investment came from the trust your family placed in my name, with no restrictions except personal use and investment. The remaining acquisition was funded through restaurant profits, private lending, and legally documented operating income. Priya appeared at the kitchen doors, arms folded. David remained beside me. The staff stood still around the room, not watching the Kang family, watching me. That was when the room changed. For 3 years, they had assumed I stood near power. Tonight, they saw power standing near me. Jihoon reached for his phone. I let him. He called his lawyer. His hand shook just enough for Hana to notice. He said Meridian Hearth 3 times. He turned away from the table, voice dropping lower each time. No one ate. No one moved. When he returned, his face had lost its colour. How long? He asked. The room heard that. Every syllable. How long have you owned this place? 18 months, I said. The same 18 months you thought I was decorating. A few guests looked down. Shame is quieter when it arrives late. I turned toward Hana at last. This is not your seat. Her lips parted. I did not raise my voice. You may stay for dinner if you want. You are pregnant, and I will not embarrass you for needing security in a story that was probably sold to you as love. But that chair has my name on it, and in this restaurant, names still mean something. Slowly, Hana stood. Jihoon moved as if to help her. She did not take his hand. That was the first consequence he did not expect. David stepped forward and removed the gold placard from the table. Mrs. Kang. He held it out to me. I looked at it for a long second, then placed it face down beside the binder. I will not be needing that name much longer. Insuk's face went very still. Chairman Baik murmured something in Korean. I understood every word. She listened all this time. Yes, I had. I had listened when they thought English made me harmless, and Korean made them safe. I had listened when they discussed private bookings. I had listened when they questioned my bloodline, my manners, my worth, my usefulness. And while they spoke over me, I learned the floor plan. Comment the word unrecognizable if you know what it feels like when a room finally sees the woman they spent years underestimating. I did not scream. I did not throw wine. I did not ask Jihoon whether he loved her. By then, love was the least useful question in the room. Powerful men can say love and still pull out a chair for betrayal. I had no interest in his vocabulary. I wanted consequences. You can finish your dinner, I told him. The kitchen is excellent tonight. I made sure of that personally. I turned to the table. For everyone else, the main course will be served shortly. Onyx and gold honors confirmed reservations, even when the guests behave poorly. A few staff members lowered their eyes to hide smiles. Jihoon stepped toward me. Kendra, wait. There it was. The first request. Not before the chair. Not before Hannah. Not before his mother made room for my replacement. After the paperwork. Men like Jihoon do not fear losing women first. They fear losing control. I looked at him. Do not touch me. He stopped. Every elder saw it. Good. I will send divorce papers tomorrow, I said. My lawyers will be very clear. I want nothing from the Kang family that I did not build. No shipping interest. No inheritance. No settlement disguised as guilt. No apology negotiated by counsel. His mouth tightened. Then what do you want? I looked around the room. At the chandelier I approved. At the staff I hired. At the kitchen I rebuilt. At the chair they tried to use as a weapon. I already have it. Then I walked out. not rushed, not shaking, not waiting for him to call my name twice. The driver opened the car door before I reached the curb. Inside the restaurant, behind the glass, I saw the room remain frozen. That image stayed with me, not because they were shocked, because for the first time, they were quiet for the right reason. The divorce took 4 months. My lawyers were precise. Jihoon's lawyers were louder. That is usually how you can tell who is standing on weaker paper. The Kang family tried 3 arguments. First, that the trust money made onyx and gold a marital asset. It did not. Second, that the restaurant's success relied on Kang patronage. It did not. Third, that my public reveal damaged Jihoon's standing with private partners. It did. That one was true. It was also not my problem. I had not exposed him with gossip. I had corrected a seating arrangement with documentation. The judge was unmoved by wounded pride wearing a suit. I kept onyx and gold. Meridian Hearth Group remained mine. I walked away from the Kang name, the Kang house, the Kang accounts, and every dollar tied to businesses I had no hand in building. That matters, because this was never about taking his empire. It was about refusing to let his empire convince me I was small. In-suk sent one message after the papers were finalized. 3 words in Korean. You surprised me. I read it once, deleted it. Some women want apology. I wanted distance. Priya sent dinner to my office that night. The same dish we served the first month, the restaurant turned a profit. On top of the covered plate was a note. You built this. Nobody gave it to you. I kept that note in my top drawer. Still do. 6 weeks after the divorce, the Kang family tried to book Onyx and Gold for a private council dinner under one of their old company aliases. The request came through on a Tuesday. Of course it did. David brought it to my office without comment. I read the name on the form. Private dining room. 40 guests. No press. Special entrance. Full discretion. The same room. The same number of chairs. The same arrogance, now wearing a different company name. For a long moment, I felt the old version of myself stir the one who might have said yes, just to prove she was unaffected. The one who believed strength meant being gracious to people who had never once been careful with her. Then I remembered Hana in my seat, Jihoon's hand on her chair, In-suk telling me not to make things difficult, and I signed the refusal myself. Not banned, not dramatic, just unavailable. David read the note and raised an eyebrow. I had written only one sentence. Onyx and Gold is no longer available for private events requiring the owner's silence. He smiled. Should I send it? Yes. An hour later, Jihoon called. I watched his name light up my phone. For 3 rings, I felt nothing. That was new. On the 4th, I declined. He left a voicemail. I deleted it unheard. Peace does not always arrive as forgiveness. Sometimes it arrives as a phone you no longer answer. 9 months after the divorce, I signed the lease on a second location, 3 blocks from the office, building my mother used to clean at night while I did homework under fluorescent lights. I brought her to the empty space before construction began. She walked slowly across the unfinished floor, touching the bar top, the window frames, the place where the kitchen would be. You built all this? She asked. I nodded. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, and you never called me to complain about how hard it was. I didn't want you to worry. She looked at me the way only a mother can look at a daughter who has confused silence with strength. I would have worried anyway, she said, but I would have been proud sooner. That hurt more gently than betrayal, because it was true. I had learned to hide pain from enemies and accidentally hid it from people who loved me too. That is a different kind of healing. Priya now runs both kitchens. David oversees front of house across the group. Bernadette Cho, the investigator who once slid a folder across a diner table and gave me back the truth, sends a case of wine every year on the anniversary of that dinner. She never writes a card. She does not need to. Some women understand ceremony without decoration. Table 12 is still my favorite seat in Onyx and Gold. Not the head table. Not the private room. Table 12. The first place I sat alone after the restaurant became profitable. The place where I cried into cheap wine because ownership felt so unfamiliar in my hands. Sometimes, after closing, I sit there in a simple black dress, heels kicked off beneath the table, listening to the kitchen shut down and the last glasses being polished at the bar. No husband beside me. No mother-in-law measuring my worth. No family name hanging over my head like borrowed weather. Just me, Kendra Voss, owner. If there is one thing I want you to carry from this story, let it be this. Some people underestimate you because they truly believe you are small. Others underestimate you because your silence benefits them. Let them misunderstand you if you must. But do not misunderstand yourself. Underestimation is not always a curse. Sometimes it is cover. It is the quiet space where you build, learn, save, sign, prepare, and become so rooted in your own life that by the time they look down to check whether you are still beneath them, the floor already belongs to you. You do not need to scream to prove you were wronged. You do not need to beg for a seat at a table where people are already planning your replacement. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm, stay precise, and let the truth arrive with signatures, witnesses, and keys. Jihoon thought he was choosing a woman over me. He was really revealing what he believed I would tolerate. His mistake was not that he loved someone else. His mistake was assuming betrayal would make me collapse instead of move. I think about that anniversary dinner sometimes. Not with rage anymore. With clarity. If he had not seated Hana in my chair, I might have spent 5 more years being polite inside a marriage that had already ended. I might have kept waiting for a confession from a man who confused cowardice with timing. I might have kept shrinking politely so his family could remain comfortable. Instead, he gave me a room full of witnesses. A chair. A placard. A moment so publicly cruel that I finally stopped protecting him from the truth. I do not know what happened between Jihoon and Hana after that night. That story is not mine to carry. Mine ends where it should, with a woman who was once handed money, meant to keep her quiet, and used it to build a life loud enough that the people who dismissed her still whisper her name carefully. Not Mrs. Kang. Kendra Voss. And when I walk through Onyx and Gold now, every staff member knows exactly who owns the room. If this story hit something in you, tell me in the comments which moment stayed with you most, the chair, the ownership binder, or the final refusal. And if you are new here, welcome. This channel is full of stories for every woman who had to rebuild quietly before the world was ready to notice. I'll see you in the next story.